and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT patch rundown video. Today we'll be diving into the newest patch 11.4 and all the changes that come with it. This is a large patch which some players have been calling set 4.75 due to the amount of changes. With so many changes to cover, let's go ahead and get the preamble over so we can dive right into the patch notes. But of course, before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get right back to the video. To begin, there's a few important system changes to cover. First up are the changes to the Lucky Lantern. Lucky Lantern has had a relatively lukewarm reception so far since it was introduced in 4.5, with a lot of criticism centered around the loaded dice consumable, especially in regards to rerolling. To address this, they've made more than one loaded dice dropping in stage 3 and 4 no longer possible. In addition to that, you will also only be getting, at most, one target dummy in those stages. Lastly, they've reduced the amount of components you can get in stage 4 down to 2 from 3. Overall, these are good changes to help reduce the impact of Lucky Lantern consumables later on in the game. Now, on to Chosen changes. All of the base stats, besides the 200 health increase, are being nerfed. Spell power is going down to 15 from 30, attack damage down to 10 from 20, mana reduction from 25% to 15%, and lastly, bonus health is down to 300 from 400. Those are all fairly severe nerfs to the stats of Chosen units. All in all, it's likely a good idea to lower the power level as Chosen, as it can swing the game drastically if you high roll certain units. Besides those nerfs, they're increasing the base odds of rolling a Chosen in your shop from 33% to 50%. This increase is meant to facilitate flexible play so that you don't feel stuck with a Chosen throughout the game. Now you can sell your Chosen and find a new one relatively quickly. And the last Chosen change is directed at rolling odds for 1 and 2 cost Chosen champions at level 4. It's going from 60-40% to 80-20%, which will have a large impact on the meta since aggressively leveling and trying to hit 4-cost Chosen units is common. Let's move on now to the trait changes. The first trait being nerfed is Assassin. The crit chance for 6 Assassin is going down to 50% from 55%, and the bonus critical damage is down to 90 from 100. 4 Assassins is also being nerfed as bonus damage is down to 55 from 60. In general, it didn't seem like Assassin at higher tiers was much of an issue, but it's in line with other balance changes in this patch, so it makes sense to nerf them. Brawlers, on the other hand, definitely overperform once you hit 8 of the trait. That means it's nerf time. The bonus health is going down to 1400 from 1600 for 8 Brawlers. As for the bonus attack damage, it's getting a much harsher nerf as it's going down to 4080 from 6120 for 6 and 8 Brawlers. While these are good changes, it does make the scaling of Brawlers much worse in the late game. This is not inherently a bad thing, but worth keeping in mind if you're running them during the mid game. Cultist is one of the few traits not being nerfed, as the 9 Cultist Galio is getting a big increase in bonus magic resistance as it's going up to 60 from 20. Essentially, the goal here is to help the Galio against Dragon Soul, as the percent health damage was a hard counter to him. Speaking of Dragon Soul, they originally dodged the nerf bat for 11.4, but upon further review of the 11.3 meta, it was deemed they also needed a nerf. So they lowered the Dragon Soul Blast down to 40% max health from 50% and lowered bonus stats to 40-70 140% from 40-80 160%. These aren't too drastic of changes, so Dragon Soul should still be playable, especially for certain champions like Olaf. Divine has been doing well thanks to Kale, but 8 Divine still wasn't that appealing. Thus, they've tweaked the numbers a bit so that 2 and 4 are a bit weaker, 6 is unchanged, and 8 is slightly stronger. While this does lower the value of splashing in Divine, it's still going to be just fine for Kale builds. 8 Divine will be chaseable now, but likely lacks consistency since it requires a spatula. Interestingly, Elderwood is being nerfed, but this is likely due to all the nerfs hitting other traits as well. The armor and magic resist is going down to 15-20-30 from 15-25-40, and the bonus attack damage plus spell power is going down to 5-10-15 from 5-10-20. Were these necessary nerfs? Potentially not, but precautionary nerfs to avoid a hotfix patch is not a bad idea. And the last trait getting nerfed is Warlords. Warlords were doing too well in the mid game and scaled insanely well late game with 9, so they've lowered the bonus stats for those tiers. The health is going down to 250, 400, 700 from 250, 500, 850, and the bonus spell power is down to 25, 40, 70 from 25, 50, 85. These are substantial nerfs to warlords in the late game, so expect to see them mainly played as a mid-game transition synergy like they have been in the past. Alright, let's move on to champion changes, which has a lot of one-cost nerfs across the board. Diana's having her attack speed reduced to 0.65 from 0.7, but more importantly, her ability is getting nerfed across all tiers. Basically, they're nerfing all the strong one-cost 3-star units from 11.3, so they've lowered Diana's power by a significant amount. Fiora somehow gets nerfed after finally being a usable champion for once. While it's only her total mana, which is going to 95 from 75, it's still sad to see that she was finally doing well. Nasus is another unit getting gutted by nerfs as his mana is going up to 80 from 60, magic resist down to 40 from 50, and his damage is lowered across all tiers for his ability. It's likely he'll still be playable, but you're really going to need to hit a lot of Nasus to make it even remotely worth rerolling for him in 11.4. To no one's surprise, we have nerfs coming to Nidalee as well as a bug fix. Basically, her ability would add 1 extra hex to the distance, which made her do higher damage than she should have, especially in melee range. Now she'll be much worse in close quarters. As for the rest of her changes, she's had an overall reduction to her spear damage, as it's going down to 100, 150, 250 from 225, 300, 600. To compensate for these harsh nerfs, they're leaning into her theme of doing more damage to further away targets by increasing the bonus damage per hex to 80% from 20%. It's unlikely we'll see 3-star Nidalee doing well in 11.4, but she still should be an okay champion during Stage 2. Yasuo is also getting his 3-star damage reduced by a lot as his attack damage scaling is going down to 180, 185, 190% from 180, 200, 225%. These are pretty harsh number reductions, though he should still be playable in a duelist reroll composition if you hit Yasuo 3 early enough. Just keep in mind he won't scale so well, so you're going to need Callista or Yone to shore up the weaker late game. Now onto 2 costs, starting with buffs to both Braum and Nautilus. Braum is going up to 0.7 attack speed to make better use of his Dragon Soul buff, and his mana is going down to 60 from 70 to make him more consistent. Nautilus gets a buff to his magic resist as it's up to 40 from 30, but his damage reduction shield from Fabled is nerfed to 50% from 60%. Overall, these 2 Vanguards should be viable enough options throughout the game, now instead of being niche or not played at all. Teemo gets a huge nerf as his target prioritization is being changed from the highest attack speed to current target. This really hurts his value a lot, but it's likely better overall for the game. Katarina is first up for 3 costs as she's being wrecked by nerfs on top of the Warlord nerfs. The number of targets hit is going to 456 from 468, and the spell damage is down to 1500 from 1650 at tier 3. Basically, she's still going to be good mid-game, but will be much weaker scaling late game, to the point that re-rolling her may not be worth it at all. Neeko basically doesn't feel like a real champion without Fabled, so they're buffing her ability damage to 200, 300, 400 from 150, 225, 375. To compensate that change, they've lowered her bonus damage with Fabled to 150% from 200%. Honestly, she's still likely to be an underwhelming champion, even more so with her Fabled damage being lowered. Another champion doing too well at tier 3 is Shyvana. In addition to the brawler nerfs, her magic resist is being lowered to 60 from 80, and her burn damage is going down to 125, 250, 500 from 150, 300, 600. With less health, magic resist, and attack damage, they've reduced her scaling as a carry by quite a bit. Oddly enough, they're buffing Aatrox again as his ability damage is going up to 400, 600, 2000 from 350, 550, 1500. The main issue with Aatrox is the counterplay you can do against his pull, but honestly as a champion, he's really good, especially since they've continually buffed him. Kayle is getting a nerf to her damage at tier 3, but more importantly, her 2-star damage is going from 180 to 150. Kayle is one of, if not the best carries in the game, so it's an overall necessary adjustment. Continuing the theme of buffing Fabled champions baselines, Cho'Gath is having his armor increased to 60 from 40. His targeting should also be improved to hit crowds more frequently. Cho'Gath was the least reliant on Fabled, so these are just nice buffs that will make him a more common champion to toss in for crowd control. Olaf apparently wasn't doing that well, which is probably due to the fact that 3-star units were overtaking the 11.3 meta. But he's getting a buff to his cleave damage as it'll be 50% across all tiers now, and his abilities Unstoppable will now block AD reduction. Somewhat nice buffs for Olaf though, probably didn't need them. Tryndamere, on the other hand, definitely needs buffs, especially with nerfs to warlords. But it's mainly quality of life changes as the targeting for his spin is in a slightly larger range and the speed of his spin is being increased. Besides that, his mana is going to 6100 from 5100, so we'll get his improved spin off slightly earlier in fights. Ornn is up next with 2 artifacts being changed. First is Eternal Winter, which is definitely his best artifact by far, as hits until frozen is going to 7 from 5. It's a good change as this artifact is quite powerful. Manazane has been doing the worst for Ornn, so they're buffing the duration to 4 seconds instead of 8. Basically, the second cast will happen much quicker, which will increase the value of Manazane by a lot. Ignoring the 3-star buffs to Yone, the only substantial changes are a buff to his initial abilities damage, as it's going to 800 from 600 at tier 1 and tier 2. The second part of his ability damage is going up to 750 from 600. They've buffed Yone so much, he's likely back to being a late game monster that he once was. The last champion change is to Samira, who is losing a bit of auto attack range as it's going down to 420 from 660. Basically, this makes her slightly harder to position and puts her in danger more often. Not too big of a deal, as she'll still be good as a carry. Our last section of changes is to items. First is an interesting alteration to Deathblade, as the starting stacks are now 4 up from 1, with the increased AD per stack going from 20 to 10. This means it's going to hit harder initially but scale slower, but since the damage mainly matters initially, it feels kind of like an odd change. We'll have to see how it plays out, but starting with 40 damage instead of 20 seems like a large buff. Gargoyle Stoneplate needed a little bit of love, so the bonus stats it gives is going to 20 from 15. Good changes for an underutilized item. Sunfire Cape is the opposite, as it's one of the most used items, so they're nerfing it just a little bit by having the burn effect apply every 2.5 seconds instead of just 2. This should lower the overall damage the item does without making it worthless, so another good change. Much like the Olaf change, Quicksilver will now also block the AD reduction debuff. Not sure Quicksilver needed a buff, but for consistency's sake, it makes sense. And lastly, there's another, yes another, rework to Static Shiv. It will no longer deal bonus damage to shields. Instead, it can now critically strike, which also lowers the magic resist of targets hit by the critical strike by 60% for 6 seconds. Since this is a pretty powerful effect, they've lowered the damage to 60 from 80 and removed the target hit scaling, so it now only hits 4. Perhaps this time Shiv will finally be in a healthy place, though these changes make it relatively niche. It's definitely an interesting change that players will likely not fully explore for quite some time. And that's all for today's video, folks. There were a ton of changes, so make sure you study up on the patch notes before playing ranked. Overall, though, the main takeaway is nerf, nerf, and more nerfs. Let us know in the comment section below which change is your favorite. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.